So NanoCommons is an e-infrastructure project, and as a research infrastructure project, it is different than a pure research project. So yes, we do some research, but the research that we do is very much designed to develop the infrastructure and to support our community. So we've three pillars of activity, which is the joint research activities to develop the infrastructure, the community building and networking activities, of which this is part, and really then demonstrating how we can use the infrastructure to support others. And then our transnational access component, which is a way of funding users to engage with the tools and the services offered by the research infrastructure. So this is just briefly, when we started the project back in 2018, this was sort of the vision we had of where NanoCommons fits into the landscape as it was at the time. So we had a bunch of FP7 and some early Horizon 2020 projects that were generating data that we were hoping to capture. We had a lot of international organizations and centers and databases that we were working with. The UN had just started the EU Observatory for Nanomaterials. There was the research infrastructure for nanomedicine characterization, and of course the EU activities, and then our EU Nanosafety Cluster and the EU-US communities of research. So we sort of saw ourselves as having a sort of a central role in integrating across these broader activities. So developing tools for data input and output, for integration and networking, to support knowledge output to the key stakeholders, and really developing tools here around harmonization, meta-analysis, federated access to data, and interoperability of data sets. But of course, in the intervening years between 2018 and 2021, a lot has changed. So we now have the cluster of governance projects, and we have the cluster of Safe by Design projects. So we see these two clusters along with the overarching nanosafety cluster as some of the key partners and stakeholders that we want to be working with and supporting in terms of accessing our tools and helping with sustainability of your tools. So really then the key focus of what NanoCommons is trying to do is to facilitate interoperability and integration. Oh, I've gone too fast there. So this is just an example of the approaches that we use. So a lot of it is based on our application programming interfaces and ensuring that data on characterization, exposure, and hazard can be integrated and federated. But that the tools are developed in a way that, for example, the output of one is the input to the next. And we're sort of demonstrating it already through the close collaboration that NanoCommons has with one of the risk governance projects, RiskOn, and one of the informatics projects, NanoSolve, and developing a sort of a platform and an approach that has a common open source interface. And one of the approaches that we're using there is Dockerization or containerization to sort of facilitate sustainability and interoperability. So really sort of some of the key messages from the workshop this morning are that NanoCommons is a little different than your standard research project. So yes, we have outputs and yes, we have deliverables, but we've had the privilege of being able to update our plan of action, our description of action almost annually to really reflect where we feel that, and in response to the community-driven surveys that we've been running. So we can define our plan of action for the year based on where we identify key needs. So our focus is really on providing support to service providers and providing technical solutions, supporting the community through our transnational access projects, being open to everyone and across project boundaries. So we also, for example, use the opportunity presented by COVID to demonstrate how some of the models developed for nanosafety could be redeployed quite quickly to help in some of the activities around COVID drug discovery. So really, this workshop and this event is part of our ongoing support activities for some of our key stakeholder groups. So I've mentioned the Nanosafety Cluster, the Governance Council, and part of our activity there is through the Data Core Group, and of course the Safe by Design cluster of activities. So we have another about 8 months in our project, so we really want to see how we can really pass as much information on to the Safe by Design cluster as possible and integrate as many things as we can into the infrastructure that's being built. So this is just one example of what we've been doing. So taking an exposure model, integrating it through a series of NIME nodes to enrich with data, integrating with a PBPK model in Jackpot, and integrating also the guide nano exposure scenarios, and putting those all together to get to, for example, a risk assessment. And the key message I want to get across with this slide is that irrespective of where or how, what programming language or what approach you've used to develop your tool or your model, it can be operationalized through a number of approaches that we have in NanoCommons. So through the NIME nodes, such as this one, through Jackpot, which I've spelt wrong, apologies, Harry, and through Jupyter Notebooks, etc. So there's a number of ways that we can interoperate and operationalize. So just to very quickly talk about our transnational access applications. So it's a fairly simple process to apply for access, and it gives tailored and very specific support both for individual groups or at a whole project level. And you'll see a couple of examples of those in the lightning presentations that are coming up. And our transnational access is organized sort of into 4 key areas. So support for data management and informatics approaches to support data capture and at the experimental design stage, tools for data processing and analysis, tools for visualization and predictive toxicology, and then tools for verification and long-term storage and accessibility of data. We also have been to demonstrate the power of having an integrated research infrastructure is also being demonstrated through a number of case studies that we're currently working on, including some best practice in study design and documentation, SOP development, as we have here, the support for project clusters, but also things like the development of an extension for nanomaterials of the INCHI, which is something we've been working on. And then the TA offer is just recapping that. So there's a call has just closed at the end of last week, but we're opening another one immediately. So if as an outcome from this workshop, we have ideas of things that could be taken forward, please do discuss with us and we'll help you to apply for a TA. And with that, I shall pass very briefly to Thomas, who is going to give a couple of quick examples of things that we've been doing. So over to you, Thomas.
Okay, thank you very much. Also, welcome from my side. Yeah, as Iseult already mentioned, we have these TAs, which are then very specific support measures to support individuals, but also large projects with many things which we are trying to support you with. And I just have these highlights to make a little bit, hopefully a little bit clearer what these offers actually are, and then also gives a little bit of an feedback or examples, but the main feedback from these TAs will come then in the later talks by the people who actually were applying to these. Just as we have these 4 major categories, but each of them are quite a big chunk of different things in there. And the first one is these experimental workflows, where we clearly will see later the nanophase example on how to then have these or the huge amount of data in there in a structured form. But we also want to go a little bit more into the concept of how experimental design SOPs are developed and presented later, than how the curation workflows are done, that and then the introduction of electronic lab notebooks. We have some TAs here, but I think that's more general concept, and therefore what Iseult just mentioned, these demonstration cases are really meant to really cover these larger areas where it probably not really useful to support one specific person, but that's really more the community support which we offer. Therefore, this is less TA, even if we have a couple of them, but really many, and we would also like to engage you in that to give your feedback and work on these demonstration cases. Next slide, please. Yeah, thank you. Okay, next one is then the more really very technical and hands-on things in the data management area. We have the data sort or areas, and this is what Dieter will talk about more. Therefore, I just show this picture. You will see this picture very often anyway in these talks. But the different areas, from really storing your data, preparing your data that it can be stored, then the database integration, which we worked, for example, with eNanoMapper together, that these data are not these islands, but come together. And for all that, we want to have these ontologies to describe the data, and then everything should be fair. And all these areas we had already very successful TAs in there, and I just name here a couple of one Stockholm, for example, where more integrating of modeling data, which is perhaps not so much established as for the wet lab experimental stuff. Yeah, and that also goes into the ontology. We have to cover these models and the outcome from these models also in the ontology. Okay, next slide. Last slide, I think. And then there is the whole area of nanoinformatics, and there we also you are doing a lot, and it's really also more this integration of existing tools. Yes, Jackpot and Nanos are clearly, and then the corona modeling is something which is developed or extended, improved in NanoCommons. And these are also where these case studies were on image analysis and so on. But it's also then here this integration of tools. Yeah, and this is what the workshop today should be about, that yes, we offer services, but our services are becoming much better if we connect them, and your services hopefully also become better or more powerful if they are integrated into a larger setting. I'm not sure. Do I have another? Yeah, I have another slide. This is just a very specific example that we were also looking quite broadly into what we can support. And then Tim Dungeon came to us and said, can we support COVID-19 activities to find drugs against the virus? And we were helping there, especially Athens and Novo Mechanics, in preparing, looking at these ligands which they propose as possible hits for these, and see if they are safe. Yeah, and therefore there was the next slide, please. This little thing where you also had these fragments which they tested, also went through ADME testing to see if there is any problem in them. Already at this very early stage, we should not bring problems in, which then makes the development of a real drug really problematic. I think that's all.